fasting. That way I won't feel hungry and I can feed my children and my mother who had diabetes, then she would be okay. I went to get a restraining order because he pushed his way into the house. I hit my head on the back door, called the police. The police came and they said, well, Miss Muhammad, is his name on the lease? I said, yes, sir. They said, well, there's nothing we can do. As long as his name is on the lease, he has just as much a right to be here as you do. So they gave me the documentation to take to court to get a restraining order, and the judge gave me a lifetime restraining order because he said, you know, you really need to get away from this guy. And I said, Your Honor, I'm really trying to do that. So we set up visitation for him to have the children every other weekend. First weekend went fine. Second weekend, a friend came over and picked them up. He was supposed to have them back that Sunday so that we can take my mother to Country Buffet because that was her favorite restaurant. But when he came back, the friend, he only had a note, $2, and a letter from Taliba, my baby girl, to her grandmother. And it said, happy birthday, Grandma. And it was $2 in a note. I said, well, where are my children? He said, well, you need to call John. So at that time, we didn't have cell phones. Then, like we do now, we have pagers. So I'm paging him, and he calls back at 7:30. My son is on the phone. I say, ask your dad what time are you coming home? He say, Mom, Dad said we'll be home in an hour. Well, an hour came, and they didn't show up. So I continued to page him. He called back at 11:35 and said, we're en route from Seattle. We'll be there shortly. Well, Seattle to Tacoma was 45 minutes one way. And why would they be in Tacoma if they're supposed to be across the street at Kmart buying clothes? So as soon as I hung up the phone, I felt a tingle in my stomach like something was wrong. And they didn't come back. And it would be 18 months before I saw my children again. I went to other people for help, and they say, well, girl, at least you just get to cook for one. You're young, you can have more children. Nobody came to my rescue. Nobody came to help because John poisoned the well and told them that the children were better off with him. And so they didn't believe me. He emptied the bank accounts. He told the landlord he was no longer paying the rent. I passed out on Mother's Day, signing for a package for my mother. They took me to the hospital, told me I couldn't go back home. My mother called the hospital, said that John was on his way to kill her daughter. They placed me in a different room, took my name off the register. Social worker came in and said, Ms. Muhammad, we need for you to do 3 things. We need for you to change your name, change it to a name that when people call you, that you will recognize it. So my safe name is Millie. So we need for you to change your clothes. We're going to bring you different clothes. And the third thing we need for you to do, you need to disconnect from everybody that you know, because this man is going to kill you, and we need to put you in hiding. John told me that you have become my enemy, and as my enemy, I will kill you. I knew that meant it was going to be a headshot, one shot, one kill to the head. He was going to bury me or put me somewhere where no one would be able to find me. So once we left the hospital, we went to the shelter. I was in the shelter with 18 women, looking at TV, saw this commercial, Professional Career Development Institute. You know, the online courses. I need to learn the law. So I ordered the paralegal courses. I was making straight A's in the shelter. The YWCA found out about it, asked me to come in and help them with their legal department. I had to wear a disguise to go to their legal department, was going to the courthouse to help other women get restraining orders and custody issues settled. And I'm thinking, well, while I'm in the courthouse, I need to get my own paperwork straight. So I got my divorce October 6, 2000. I got a writ of habeas corpus that meant anywhere they found my children, they need to pick them up and bring them back to me. Washington State had just passed a law stating that if you are a victim of domestic violence, you can leave the state without being charged with kidnapping, and you do not have to tell the abuser where you're going. So my sister, who lives here in Clinton, my mother was here and she was sick. She said, can you come and help? I said, yeah, because I can wait for my children over there. So once I get here, I call the FBI and tell them my children are no longer in the country. They send an agent over and they say, well, how do you know your children are no longer in the country? I say, well, my cousin is a private investigator, and he said when the trail runs cold, then that means that the people you're looking for are no longer in the country. So he took my paperwork, mailed it back to me 2 days later, and said, we're sorry, we can't help you. This is an ongoing case. We're going to direct you back to the FBI agency in Seattle. Here's the agent's name, and here is the number. I called the number, spoke to the agent, told him, look, I'm running for my life. It's going to be a headshot. He kidnapped the children. I'm in hiding. Can you help me find my children? They said, well, Ms. Muhammad, since we know he's looking for you, we want to put you in the middle of a parking lot and use you as a decoy. This way, we can lure him out. I said, excuse me. It's going to be a headshot. They said, well, we're just trying to help you out. August the 30th, the shelter where I was living called and said, well, we think we found your children and you need to call Detective McCarthy. I called him and he said, do you know where we are? I said, no. He said, well, we're on the border of Canada. If he gets across the border with your children, there will be nothing we can do. So August the 31st, they picked up the children. They told me I needed to fly back to Tacoma for an emergency custody hearing. I went to court. The judge said, we're here today to decide who gets the children. John said, Your Honor, what you telling me? I won't be able to see my children anymore? He said, you have to do the same thing she did. And since she did her paperwork pro se, which meant I did it myself, and it is in perfect order, then she will get custody of the children. Case dismissed. We walked out of the courtroom for the attorney to call to find out where the children were. John tried to attack us in the courtroom. We had to run out of the building into the car to go to CPS to get the children. We flew back here September 5th, 2001, Labor Day. Fast forward to the shootings. We didn't know who it was. They told us 2 Caucasians in a white box truck, right? We was all ducking, pumping gas. We were too. But I was looking for John too. It wasn't until ATF knocked on my door, took me and my children into protective custody, and that's when they told us that we're gonna name your ex-husband as the sniper. And I was like, what? I said, well, do you think he would do something like this? I say, well, yeah. He said, well, why would you think that? I said, because he said I could take a small city, terrorize it. They would think it would be a group of people and it would only be me. And they asked, why would he do something like that? And he said, he didn't say anything. So now that's my daughter sitting back there. Wave your hand, honey. She attends Baldwin Wallace Conservatory. She's taking a semester off. She graduates in May of next year. Her and her sister, who attends Cleveland State, they both major in vocal performance, and they both sing opera in 8 different languages. And my son, he is 24, she's 22, my baby girl is 21. And he was diagnosed with MS last year. And he was 23 years old, 100% disabled, couldn't work. But I knew that he would, because I prayed and I know that God was going to deliver him. And I told him, I said, I know you're doing this, but this is what you need to do. I don't care what the doctors say. I don't care how they say it. That's what man says, but God says this is what it's going to be. We're going to exercise and you're going to walk. I put everything that was happening to him on my Facebook page. Turns out one of my Facebook friends was a neurologist. Said, bring me your son. Right up the street in Virginia. Took him up there. She did an assessment, and she said, we're going to put him on Tracebra because he didn't have health insurance. The doctors was giving him 10% of the medicine that he needed. 10%, just because he didn't have health insurance. She put him on this medication. The medicine is $4,000 a month. She found a grant. He goes to the doctor once a month, gets an infusion, and he walks away. He's working, he's doing good, and I know that by God's grace, we're all going to be good. So I'm an international global spokesperson on the issues of domestic violence. I have a book called Scared Silent, which I have some in the lobby. If you are a victim of domestic violence, be strategic in how you leave. I never tell a victim to leave, but I will tell you to plan, because in your planning, you will know when to leave. You should not listen to when other people say, girl, if I was you, because if they was me, they would have been ducking too. Okay? So I speak straight words. I don't try to sugarcoat because domestic violence is real, and I'm having a personal summer up here. That's why I'm doing all this sweating, just letting you know. And if you know someone who is a victim of domestic violence and you don't know what to say, because sometimes we want to get involved, but we don't know how, we don't know what to say, don't text, don't email, don't call your friend, your colleague. Take them to dinner, take them to lunch, pull them aside and say or ask one question, and that is, how can I help you? You already know they're victims. You don't need to hear their story. You don't need to hear it and go, girl, you know what's going on with her. She just tripping. Let that man beat up on her like she signed up for that. She didn't sign up for that. She signed up to have a protector, a nurturer, a maintainer. That's what the man is supposed to do. But if you ask that question, make sure you can back it up. Don't just ask because you want to be nosy. If you can't help the person, pass them on to somebody who can. Don't leave them in that position. They may see something in you that they may come up to you and say, you know what, I'm a victim of domestic violence. Don't say, I'm so sorry to hear that. Don't say that. Say, how can I help you? And then if you can't help her, can we look up some resources? Don't call her at home and say, how things going? The man is there. Don't put her in harm's way. And don't put yourself in harm's way trying to help your friend. She call you and you hear him beating her. Can you come over here? No. Call the police. Don't put yourself in harm's way. Thank you for coming and thank you for listening to my story.
Ms. Muhammad, you are indeed a survivor that most of us cannot even imagine the traumatic experience that you had. And so we're going to move on to our next speaker on our panel tonight, and that's Ms. Tanja Thompson. And we know that in 2013, there were 232,340 cases of breast cancer, serious breast cancer in the United States. We also know that in 2013, 69,000 women died from breast cancer. We also know that for breast cancer among African American women, they're second only to white women who are non-Hispanic. And so you have an experience, and that experience, as I understand, was not just once, but twice. And so we are again humbled to be in your presence and ask you to please share that experience with our audience tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here and listening to us and listening to our stories. One thing I know is that if you stand on God's faith, if you stand on his platform, he will deliver you and take you to where you need to be. He will give you the journey, he will give you the wings, and he will give you the knowledge, the spirit, and everything that you need. But you have to put it on the altar and leave it there. I could sit here and we can go through all day on what it truly believes and to be in God's favor. And I am in God's favor. In 1999, so let me start with that. I was 5 months pregnant and I had a son. He was 23 weeks old. He was born at 23 weeks of gestation and 680 grams. That's 1 pound and 5 ounces. He looked like an alien. He had a head like a crab apple. He stayed 4 months at Bethesda Naval Hospital. When I hear her say about her son only receiving 10% of a medication, let me tell you what, if you don't have good health insurance, you better check it out and find a way to get it. Me being active duty Air Force gave me everything that I needed along with my child. He spent 4 months at Bethesda Naval Hospital. Came home, he was bleeding internally. We didn't know what it was. It was literally coming out of the stool. We took him back to the hospital. They said, ma'am, your son is dying. You need to prepare yourself. I said, let me tell you something. The only thing I'm going to prepare myself for is that you bring my child home, and if he's going to die home in my home with my God. And that's what I stood on. Let me tell you now, my son is now 15 years old. That's fast forwarding. That is a true fast forward, because there's a lot more that goes along with that. So he came home. He had a couple surgeries. 2005, while I was active duty, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, ductal carcinoma inside too. I had breast cancer not only in one breast, but I had it in both. Just 18 months prior to that, I had my baseline, and I had nothing there. There was nothing there. What took me to the hospital or to the doctor was I was nursing at the time, or I had been nursing, and I was having pain. Well, the doctor said, well, you shouldn't be having pain. So she said, go to the doc, go to get a mammogram. So I went and got the mammogram, sitting there, and they squishing. I said, if I don't have cancer, I'm going to get it from all of this squishing. And they said, well, ma'am, we see some striations. I didn't even know what that meant. We need for you to do it again. I said, okay, so squish. So she said, well, in about a week or so, you'll get your results. I said, okay, but I'm getting ready to go out of town right now, so you can catch me on the way back. So she called me while I'm out of town and says, well, we really need for you to come into the office. I said, well, I'm out of town right now. I have to see you when I get back. So she said, what about 7 o'clock in the morning? I said, that's fine. So I go to my doctor, and she says, Miss Thompson? I said, yes. She said, you have breast cancer. I said, who? I said, no, not me. She said, well, she said, these are your x-rays, and I had breast cancer in the right breast, and I had breast cancer in the left breast. And she said, we need to take both of your breasts. I said, doctor, how you tell a 43-year-old lady who's still trying to get her groove on that you're going to take both of her breasts? I said, that's not happening. Literally, I did. She said, well, we're going to go and we're going to set you up with Walter Reed. And I thought about that, so I called my husband, and I said, the doctor just said I had breast cancer. He said, what? He couldn't even believe it. So being active duty, I said, I need a few more days off. So I went to my primary care physician and said, you know what? I just found out I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I need a few days off from work. So she gave me a sick slip. Anybody know military, you have to have a sick slip to be off work. So I went home, talked to my husband. We came back up to the hospital, talked to the doctor, and he was just floored. Not one time did I cry. Not one time did I not believe that God was not going to take me through, because in order to learn, in order to gain, you got to go through to get to the other side. So that was in April. May, I had bilateral mastectomy with immediate reconstruction. So this is what I tell people. You always have to find lemon. When you have lemons, you make lemonade. Because I tell people I went from a B to a C. So that was my lemonade for what I was going through. So to move a little bit further along, the things were going good. Retired from the military in 2007. Then in 2010, something decided to raise its ugly head again. I had breast. Now, mind you, when you have bilateral mastectomy, they take the tissue, they take everything. I know there's a couple men in here, you're just going to get it. That's all I can tell you. You're here, so you're going to hear it. So they take all of your tissue, and they put in a device to help pump it up so that they can put in the implants. Well, just think about theory. If there's no tissue there, how can something grow? So I'm thinking, okay, you done took all the tissue, there's nothing there. There should not be a nodule there. So this is what I do. I go to my breast doctor, and I say, oh, you know what? I feel this knot here. And she says, oh, that's nothing. It's nothing. I said, but it shouldn't be there. She says, well, go on home. I said, no, you don't know me. So I went on around. I found another doctor. I found my plastic surgeon. He looked at it and he said, oh, no, you shouldn't have anything there. But then he started thinking. He said, now, if there's something there, we need to find out what it is. He went and ordered an immediate another mammogram. He ordered a MRI and a X-ray. The X-ray showed nothing. The mammogram showed nothing. So he said, well, let's do an MRI because there's something there and there shouldn't be. So in the MRI showed that I had not one cancer, but I had two. So they went in and they did a biopsy. Well, at that time, it showed that it wasn't as aggressive as they thought it was, but come to find out that it was. So they end up taking just my left breast at that time. And once they did that, that's when they determined that it was two cancers. And they put me through, because the first time, because it was radical, I did not have to have radiation and chemotherapy. So for the second round, I had to have radiation, I had to have chemotherapy, and just go through that whole process. And I tell you what, if you are not a true believer, if you don't have the right people in your ear, if you don't have friends that can stand up for you, stand with you, find those friends, because those are the ones that you want in your life. And my friends are here who stood with me through all of my ordeal, be good, bad, and indifferent. So to go even a little, so that was the second way. Just February the 13th, 2014, this was a big storm. My 15-year-old, my son that I told you that was born at 23 weeks, 1 pound and 5 ounces, he had an internal bleed. Took him to the emergency room. They ended up having to medevac him to Georgetown because his creatinine, his H&8 had dropped down to almost single digits. Most of the time, your creatinine, your hematinic and your creatinine should at least be 15 and whatever double that, maybe 30, 15 and 30. His was down to 6 and 12. So they knew he had to have immediate blood transfusion. So took him to Georgetown. Doctors there said, oh, he had another bleed. They cauterized, sent him home. Within 24 hours, we were back in the hospital because he was bleeding again. This went on for at least a month and a half until May the 14th. I was out running. He was still in the hospital at Georgetown come May now, mind you. And I was out running. He said, Mom, he said, I'm not feeling good. I'm not feeling good. I said, well, okay, Tyson. His name is Tyson Vegas, and I'll tell you that story here in a minute. So I went to the hospital. Like I said, I was running. So when I got there, he saw me and he just went, oh, I'm not feeling good. So he collapsed on the bed. I started screaming and hollering like a maniac. Get in here right now, get in here. Doctors, everybody, they thought it was a cold blue, running in there. By this time, he had bled out. He had just blood just coming from down there. I'm looking there, and as they're working on him, I'm working on him, trying to keep him calm. They literally were taking blood from out of the bags, literally putting it directly into his legs, into his arms, because they knew he had lost so much blood. They took him over to the ICU, and he ended up having 10 units of blood, plasma. His blood pressure had dropped down to 50/32. not on one occasion, but on several occasions. I almost lost my child that day, but I stood on God's faith. 2 weeks later, at that time, they put him on the kidney and transplant list, May the 14th. So we're like, oh, okay, it's the weekend, maybe this would be our time to get a donor. Fast forward, it happened again. He bled out again. He ended up having 10 units of blood, plasma, being intubated. When you say about your baby being intubated, I know exactly what that looks like. He was, not only was he intubated, they end up having to put extra fluid on him. So a 130-pound child now is 170 pounds. So imagine what that looks like, and as a parent, what you're looking at when you're seeing your child not only intubated, but a size and a half larger than what he was. So the same routine went on. I'm standing there steadfast. I'm working with the doctors. One thing I do truly, truly believe that when God puts you places, he put people there also there to help you. So as I'm talking to the doctors, I'm becoming more knowledgeable in what diagnoses are, what potassium levels are, what hemoglobin, creatinine, all these different things that as a parent, when you have a child that's sick, you learn, but you don't want to learn, but you are thrust into a situation that you have to be in. Fast forward, June the 2nd, I'm at home. Dad is at the hospital with Tyson, and I knew they were going to be coming home in a day or so. So this is June the 2nd. So about 7 o'clock, I get a phone call, and it says, hello, this is Georgetown Transplant. I was like, oh, daggone the doggone bill collector calling me from the hospital. I said, but why are they calling me at 7 o'clock? I said, I know I owe y'all some money, like $1 million for as long as he been there, but I don't know why y'all calling me at 7 o'clock. So I just said, okay, Tanya, just switch off that part of the brain and listen to what the lady has to say. She said, Ms. Thompson, this is transplant coordinator, let you know that we have a kidney and a liver for Tyson. I said, huh? I said, so I'm gonna send to him. So this is how the call comes? So immediately I said, okay. She said, well, where is Tyson? I said, well, he's there at the hospital with his dad. And I mean, how come you're not calling and knocking to him? So I immediately got off the phone, called Dad up, and let him know. He didn't even know that there was a possible liver and kidney donor coming. So they immediately start prepping Tyson. Now, mind you, Tyson's body has been through rigmarole. And just, you think about a healthy person having to go through this. It's a challenge. But imagine when your child is already sick and having to go through this. So they prepped him. So the very next morning, he received his liver and his kidney. Thank God. Because you think about your child. My child was going to die if my child did not receive a liver now, kidney, you can live on dialysis because he was on dialysis for a period. But he could not live without having that liver. And the thing is, it wasn't the liver as much as it was the portal vein to the liver. So he could not receive a donation from a family member because as the liver will grow and regenerate, it doesn't regenerate that particular organ, that particular vital artery that you need for that blood flow. So he